If you make a vertical 90-degree turn on a square 1, you can't make any other types of turns because none of the cuts actually line up. However, if you were to find a 2-layer or 4-layer square 1, the cuts do actually line up so that you can make additional turns. I thought this could make for a very interesting solve, so I wanted to design one of these puzzles for myself and make it out of a mini 2x2. A regular 4-layer square 1 had been made before, so I decided to angle the cuts in a way that resembles the Pandora Cube, which is a 3x3 shape mod. After the design was complete, I sent all of the pieces to my 3D printer. After the parts were all printed, assembling the Pandora Square-1 was actually fairly straightforward. I first glued on the first 7 extensions to the mini Ishin 2x2 and then put on all of the outer pieces to those extensions. And now the final step is to just glue the last extension onto the 2x2, and in the process I want the final outer pieces to be on this extension, because I can't disassemble the puzzle later to put them in. Now that everything's glued on, the puzzle is finally assembled. Now it's time to sticker it up, take it outside, and see how it turns. So, how did the Pandora Square-1 turn out? I think the inner Pandora pattern turned out looking really interesting because when the puzzle is in the solved state, it's kind of hard to see how it would actually turn because most of the cuts don't line up with anything at all. In terms of the way it actually turns, the 2x2 turns are fine. The mini Ishin 2x2 turns quite easily, but it doesn't really corner cut. And you can kind of see that in the real puzzle, where the 2x2 turns are fine, but you can't really corner cut them much. And to top it off, the outer turns don't really corner cut much either, so overall you're just going to have to line up your turns kind of precisely with this one. At the very least, if you align everything correctly, turning is very smooth. However, it might not be immediately obvious what the best method is for actually turning the outer layers, because they can be a bit hard to grip since the only way to turn them separate from the inner layers is to hold the inner layers on their inside, which doesn't work if you hold it too far towards the outside of the cube. So what you have to do is hold the inner pieces on the center line so that you're barely touching them. And then the outer pieces will just glide right over your fingers without actually making contact, making the turns much easier to do than trying to actually nudge the inner layers while keeping the outer layers stationary. Since this puzzle is based on a square 1, you have to align the top and bottom layers with the inner 2 layers in a way that makes all the cuts match up, so that you can make vertical turns, just like on a square 1 where you have to align the top and bottom layers with the single middle layer. However, since this puzzle is also based on a 2x2, you can make vertical turns on either vertical axis instead of just one. Basically, imagine the square 1's middle layer is a 1x1x2. Here, it's just a normal 2x2x2. And also, being internally a 2x2 means that this puzzle can scramble just like one, which means that the shapeshifting gets pretty crazy compared to the normal square 1. To give you more of a taste of how the Pandora Square-1 turns, I'm gonna do something roughly approximate to a checkerboard pattern on it. Basically, I'm just gonna switch the inner centers around, and then afterwards I'm gonna do the square-1 edge swap algorithms that'll make something that looks roughly like a checkerboard on the top and bottom, and on the sides will be kind of a pattern. Not really a checkerboard, but some of the colors will be swapped around, as you'll see. Even though this puzzle can't really do a proper checkerboard, I'm sure there's a lot of crazy patterns you can make, especially with the weird cuts it has, and maybe even something to do with the shapeshifting abilities. The thing I love most about this puzzle is that how on the top and bottom it looks like a normal square one with basically all of the same pieces, but you can scramble it like a 2x2, which means you're essentially taking what looks like a square one and shapeshifting it in really crazy ways that the original square one couldn't even dream of. Just to me, that sensation of adding functionality to a puzzle is really fascinating. And also, this puzzle's mechanism was fairly useful to me even after I made and finished this puzzle, because I reused this puzzle's mechanism for the Waterfall Cube Extreme, and I have several more puzzles that I'm going to show you in the future that also use basically the same mechanism, just with minor changes to accommodate the specific use. But in general, this is the mechanism I'm using right as of now for extension mods that have extra layers on them. It's fairly useful. I do also want to mention that if you want one of these for yourself, the Pandora Square-1 is available as a 3D printed puzzle on Chewy's Custom Puzzle Store. So I'll leave the link in the description, go check it out there. Anyway, now I think it is time to scramble the puzzle up. First, what I'm going to do is scramble it without shapeshifting like a square one, and then with shapeshifting like a square one. And then after that's done, I can finally scramble it like a 2x2, but not just any 2x2, a bandaged 2x2, because the square one shapeshifting is actually going to block some 2x2 moves from being made. So I think it's going to be quite an interesting scramble and solve. Let's get to it. Now it's time to solve the Pandora Square-1. The first step I'm going to do is to reduce it to a scrambled square one, which means to solve the inner 2x2 pieces orientation. This might be a bit more complicated than it seems, simply because I can't actually fully use the 2x2 move. The 2x2 is currently bandaged due to the way the square one was scrambled. So it'll be interesting to try and get around the bandaging restriction, and then to finally get it back to a normal square one scrambled state. I just finished unbandaging the 2x2, and doing so was actually quite fun, maybe even more fun than I was expecting. Anyway, I am now able to use all 2x2 moves, so I will now use them to go back to my original goal of getting this puzzle back into a square one scrambled state. Let's go ahead and do that now. Now the puzzle is fully cubic, and all I have to do is to solve the outer pieces just like a square one, and then solve the inner pieces just like as the inner pieces of a cuboid puzzle. However, it's getting quite cold here, so I think I'm going to take this puzzle inside, and as the rest of the solve shouldn't be too unique, I'll get back to you when it's all done for some final thoughts. And here we are, the puzzle is finally solved. The last part that you guys didn't see wasn't anything particularly special, it was just exactly as I said. But overall, I actually really enjoyed this solve, especially the first part where I had to figure out how to unbandage the 2x2. And I'm really glad that I made this puzzle, as it was quite a nice experience. But anyway, that's all I really have to say about it. Thank you all very much for watching, and have a great night.